Hey, this is Victor Antonio, and today I want to talk about mindset. How do you maintain the proper mindset? How do you avoid going off-road into negativity? How do you stay positive? Well, it all begins with understanding how we think. In other words, becoming aware of how we think. So I want to introduce you to this concept that takes us off track many times from our positive mindset, and that is something called a syllogistic fallacy. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of what this is, but basically, a syllogistic fallacy is bad thinking, stinking thinking, as Zig Ziglar would say, and that usually leads to false conclusions. In other words, you're totally wrong, your thinking is wrong because you made poor assumptions with your bad programming. Let me give you some examples, and then I'm going to show you how it applies to your way of thinking, and I want you to become aware of when you have this bad programming. Now, let's say, for example, you may think, you know what, successful people have degrees, right? I've heard that a lot, by the way. Successful people have degrees, and you know what? A lot of CXOs I know are successful. Therefore, the conclusion is that to be a CXO, you've got to have a degree. Well, the reality, that's a false conclusion. You first believe that successful people have degrees. Then you believe that successful people are CXOs. Therefore, the conclusion is that all CXOs have degrees. That is a false conclusion. That is bad programming and bad conclusion. In other words, I've met CXOs, presidents of company, big people in big positions who don't have degrees. Some don't even have a high school education, a diploma. So that right there is stinking thinking. That's a false conclusion. That's an example of a syllogistic fallacy. Let me give you one more, a couple more. Next, how about this one? Successful people have degrees. I've seen that one a lot, by the way. And then you think, okay, successful people also have money. Therefore, the conclusion might be that in order to have money, you need to have a degree. I got to get a degree to have money. But the reality is there's people out there who don't have a college degree, don't even have a high school diploma, who have a lot of money. But again, this programming that you have in your head can demotivate you. I have a friend of mine who swears to this day because he doesn't have a degree, that's why he's not successful. That is stinking thinking. That is a syllogistic fallacy. Here's another one. Rich people have lots of money. You know where I'm going with this one, right? And rich people are happy. Oh, you definitely know where I'm going with that. So therefore, the conclusion should be that, lots of money equals happiness. But we know that's not true. But again, that's an example of a syllogistic fallacy. You make some assumptions, and then you draw a conclusion from that assumption. Lastly, how about this one? A person has a book, right? Let's say they've written a book. They're an author now, right? And that person is successful. So you think, in order to be successful, I need to write a book. But I know many people, many authors who've written a book who are not considered successful. So again, these are all stinking thinking examples, syllogistic fallacies of how we think. My question to you is, what thinking do you have in your head? What programming do you have in your head? That's false. So let's talk about how this applies to you. I want you to start questioning all your assumptions. In other words, when you draw a conclusion or assumption rather, ask yourself, is that really true? Is that, conclusion really true? So in other words, A equals B and then B equals C. Does that mean A equals C? No. So question all the assumptions, but always find the exceptions. For example, all people who have books are successful. And then you're going to realize that there are a lot of people who are successful who have no books. How about all CXOs have degrees? Therefore, you have to need a degree to be successful. Well, again, we know there are exceptions out there of people who don't have degrees who are very successful. And last but not least is find a way. Once you find an exception, it's all of a sudden you have to kind of recalibrate your thinking. Now, how does this apply to you? Because I want this to bring it back to you. So ask yourself, what thinking, what stinking thinking, syllogistic fallacies are holding you back? I mentioned earlier, a friend of mine I know believes that in order to be successful, you need a degree. Well, that's a syllogistic fallacy because one has nothing to do with the other. Many successful people don't have degrees. You may be thinking, well, Victor, I need a lot of time in order to start my business. Really? I think I can find exceptions of people who've built their business slowly over time by just grabbing little pieces of time to build their business. So they need a lot of time. I need a lot of money to get started in business. No, you don't. A lot of people have bootstrapped their way into success. So again, what I want to do is make you aware of all this thinking that you have in your head, all these false assumptions, right? This stinking thinking, this bad programming. And once you become aware of them, the next move is to basically question those assumptions. And you do that by finding exceptions. People who are doing what you want to do they're the exceptions. In other words, you find somebody who did start a business, didn't have a lot of money. They did it. You find somebody who has 3 jobs but still managed to start their own business on the side, even though they didn't have a lot of time. That's an exception. You're finding proof that it can be done and that a lot of programming in your mind is really false. Now, a lot of people like to hang on to this false programming because it makes them feel good about themselves in a weird way. In other words, they have these excuses for not starting something, and they'll say to themselves, you know what, I would start, but there's always that but, right, which negates everything before that. I would start a business, but I don't have enough time. But if I did, it would be a heck of a business. They're lying to themselves, right? If I had more money, I would start a business because, man, if I had more money, I'd start a heck of a business. But until then, I won't start my business. Again, they're lying to themselves. This is people with bad programming. I'm asking you to look at inside. Within yourself, create the sense of awareness that every time you have this bad programming going on, these false conclusions that are being drawn, ask yourself, is that really true? Am I thinking wrongly? Because what you're going to realize is that it's this bad thinking, this stinking thinking, these are the mental breaks you have in your head that have been holding you back for years, baby, and haven't allowed you to move forward. So again, let's release the brakes. Let's get rid of that stinking thinking. Be aware of how you think, question everything, find exceptions, and then do what you know needs to be done.